Hey, it's Cyril, and I wanted to discuss the recent news about the new Earthbending Avatar series we're going to get in 2025. This video is going to be more of a ramble and a rant and a stream of consciousness because it's not scripted at all. I might as well start with all the concerns I have. I am cautiously optimistic for the new Earthbending Avatar, but at the same time, I'm not so optimistic because a lot of what the Earthbending Avatar will have to deal with will be governed by what happened in The Legend of Korra, not Avatar The Last Airbender. I have a love-hate relationship with The Legend of Korra as a series. When it does stuff well, I'll praise it and defend it to hell and back, but when it does stuff badly, it's just awful. For example, Rava Vatu. I don't like the Rava Vatu dynamic at all. I don't like beginnings as an origin story in the greater context of the Avatar universe because for starters, I prefer the spirit of balance in the world to not be just the light spirit. I prefer them to be both the light and the dark, so Wan should have absorbed both Rava and Vatu in order to bring balance to the world at the time. But then there's this whole depiction of Rava and Vatu. It's basically the creators taking yin and yang from Taoism and then trying to make it fit into the mold of good and evil. What's that religion Augustine believed in before he converted to Catholicism? I think it's called Manichaeism. Yeah, that's what it reminds me of. I've heard some fans refer to the Ravavatu dynamic as Gnosticism, but I don't know that much about Gnosticism besides their hatred of flesh and matter. I bring this up because you can't exactly hit the brakes and say, well, for the Avatar to bring balance to the world, the Avatar must have both Rava and Vatu. No, no, that's not what was depicted. I'm also not a fan of retconning the whole Rava Vatu dynamic because I'm sure comic fans on the channel know what floodgates open when you do that. Ahem. One More Day, the confusing retcons behind Hawkman, the confusing retcons behind Sin's Past. Then again, the other option we have on the table is to simply just ignore the stuff in The Legend of Korra, which, not ideal, but it's also not unprecedented because one of the biggest frustrations fans have had with the transition from Aang to Korra as avatars was generally the role of a Fire Nation. If you didn't notice, the Fire Nation didn't appear in The Legend of Korra save for like one or two islands. And of course, Fire Lord Azumi spoke, but that's not exactly showing what happened to the Fire Nation after the war. The Hundred Year War in general is treated like a bit of ancient history when it is actually not that. I mean, I hate using the real world because this is a story, but stuff that happened 100 years ago in our world wars and the wars, they still affect the present because history just cascades that way. For example, not 100 years ago, but is actually getting up there, the unexploded ordnances in all of Europe, that's still a problem. In Germany, they're still digging out basements of worth of in Germany, from all the bombings that they were subjected to at the end of the Second World War, they are still digging them out of basements and out of everywhere. Basements, I think even some pieces of subway stations. Or is it Italy? Because I know in Italy they keep running to an issue of hitting stuff where they want to put down new subway tracks or make a new tunnel or whatever, and then they run into things like, oh, some ancient Roman ruins or an old cistern. Huh, this is now a historical site. But whatever, I'm getting off topic. Besides the technological advances, I don't remember much about the Hundred Years' War being a plot point in The Legend of Korra, or at least not treated as mythology. Well, I've covered the other things I disliked about The Legend of Korra, the spirits, ignoring consequential opportunities for the Hundred Year War, but I think I could talk about my distaste for the technology creep in Legend of Korra. I generally don't buy into the fan assertion that the Avatar franchise went from low-tech feudalism to immediately airships and magnetic rails. This is an inaccurate assessment of Avatar since we did see tunnel boring drills, airships, submarines, and tanks in Avatar. My problem is how it can fall into a bit of an uncanny valley. Like, the world is so different from our own in many ways, yet we're getting closer and closer to modernity and the socio-political implications of modernity. This includes weapons of mass destruction. Uh, the spirit lasers, I'm not a fan of. The mecha tanks in the first season, I wasn't a fan of them, but I did like the steampunk aesthetic, and I think it worked well for the show. But eventually, we just got into like several story tall mecha suits with lots of mecha, and I'm getting tired of saying the word mecha, just making this rant. With the spirit lasers and how they're a weapon of mass destruction, they sort of combine the worst elements of this thing. I don't like how the spirits were sort of simplified and just watered down. Now their energy can be used to make WMDs because reasons. And then the mecha suit, you just slap a WMD onto it. We're in a bit of a catch-22 situation here. Like I said, we could ignore this like Avatar has had a history of ignoring of what came before it, and which I find the least bad option because we don't get into the complicated politics that is nuclear proliferation, and I don't want to talk about the politics of The Legend of Korra at all. I think they are undercooked. Or we can continue down that trend, which I don't think should be what the next Earth Avatar should be doing. Enough about me whining about The Legend of Korra and its transition from Avatar to Korra. I think you are all here for something more reasonable, and here's what I think should happen, but I'm sure it's not going to. So, the Earth Kingdom is the most conservative of all the nations. The methods of locating the Avatar geomancy is poor at locating nomads because the Earth Kingdom tends to be a very large area where people tend to be born and raised in the same general vicinity for like generations. And a plot that you could do for at least one season is just searching around for Avatar relics in order to reconnect with the Avatars. We start with Korra and Aang, and then we head all the way back to Wan. We would know the Avatar spirit. Not would. We do know the Avatar spirit functions like a chain, so it would be interesting to see what happens. We can go through all the familiar avatars like in relatively quick succession, and then we can get into the lore behind it, though I'm not sure how this will affect the books. Okay, so I think this is the end of this. If you like my content, please consider liking this video, subscribing, and perhaps tipping me on Ko-fi. Have a nice day.